The Industrial Revolution was the new transition to the new manufacturing process. This was a period in which the major industrialization and it was predominantly arrogant. Rural societies in Europe and America became the industrial and urban regions. The revolution power came from the mechanism of agriculture and textile manufacturing. This new change had a massive effect on social, cultural, and economic conditions. Western Europe went from agricultural to industrial, which changed the way the world produced goods. So why did it start? The answer is an enormous commercial and technology head start. Because England was ahead of its time, Great Britain controlled the largest empire in the history of the world. Some examples of why England was so ahead was for the reasons of agricultural revolution, financial innovations, the Enlightenment and scientific revolution, navigable rivers and canals, coal and iron, government policies, and the world trade. Another reason being the population growth. The world's human population grew by about 57%. In Britain, there was 9 million people in 1700, and by the 1800s, the number reached up to 16.5 million. An exploding population was not necessarily a benefit to countries that were, in the 18th century, generally very poor and organized economically around maintenance agriculture. Traditionally, a rising population had raised the demand for food and goods, but it had also always overwhelmed a land's product captivities. Population explosions in earlier centuries had often resulted in catastrophic corrections such as famine and plague, which returned the population to a lower level. The increase in population during the 18th century turned out to be quite different. While it raised demand and hence helped to spur on the Industrial Revolution, the population growth did not outstrip the growth of economic productivity. For the first time in history, the terrible cycle of economics, surplus, population growth, overpopulation, and famine was broken. There were many indicators that the Industrial Revolution propelled the world human population into the era of living and production at the ultimate expense of the human condition. It also impacted the resources that had been taken for granted for the entire prior history of humankind. The population growth caused more people from the countryside being freed up to work for wages in the new cities and eventually increased demand for products such as clothing. Birth rates, death rates, and immigration are just some of the factors that helped with the 1700s baby boom. With all the new factories being constructed in the cities, more job opportunities became available to everyone. The farm life that most lived was vigorous labor for very low income. People left their farm lives to go into the city to grasp the better life. Young men left the family farms as soon as they could. They went to towns and cities to look for an easier and better way of life. Many of them found it in the factories. A young man who worked hard and learned new skills could rise quickly to better and better jobs. With all the success becoming to surface, it interested and brought more into the city to work. People didn't just travel from farm to the city, they traveled from city to city, country to country, and across the sea. They traveled to get away from poverty and either religious or political persecution. America was the hotspot of where people went to start over, and usually came over from Western Europe. Agriculture was the main source of occupation for the British population, although it was the most work. That made people want to leave and start over with an easier life. The thing about the people who did pack up, leave, and start over was that it worked. Improvements helped in so many ways on how everything tied together. The housing and clothing was in better condition, they had more food that was easy to obtain, and the healthcare was more advanced. Very few people lived in their life unwedded. Marriages happened more often and at younger ages, which also increased the rate of children being born. Two other huge factors were that the mortality rate was higher and the death rate went down. When the newcomers were able to find jobs, it was easy for them to see how this life had great advantages. The work hours were long, but the family time was able to finally exist again. The pay was able to support the growing families. This happened to almost everyone. It had a huge effect on society. The growing population of the Industrial Revolution helped to expand out in Western Europe and into America. The movement was helped by both technology and scientific developments. This whole time was a cause and effect. With younger and more marriages, the real wages rose. With the higher wages came a result of growing revolution and economic prosperity. Having an improved food production, the people had a better diet, which helped them to live longer. Medicine was just starting to advance, and this was when the smallpox vaccine was just beginning to have a small role in the world. Human population growth was inevitably tied together with increased use of natural and man-made resources, energy, land for growing food and for living, and waste byproducts that are disposed of to decompose, pollute, or be recycled. This exponential population growth led to the exponential requirements for resources, energy, food, housing, and land, and as well as exponential increase in waste byproducts. With all of the farmers that stayed, their life had changed quite drastically and in time paid off. Because of another important agricultural development was that of the enclosure or farmland, a change that transformed the economic and social structure of the countryside. Before, peasants had owned and worked strips of land scattered throughout a community. Also, a sizable portion of the total land was used by all of the peasants for the grazing of animals and as a source of wood in winter. The enclosure movement achieved two ends. It consolidated the strips of land together to into two unified blocks, and it divided the common land into private farms. The enclosure movement was a painful process that went against the interests of many peasants and caused a great deal of social protest. Enclosure had begun in the Middle Ages, but accelerated dramatically in the 18th century. Economically, the enclosures allowed more efficient and profitable agricultural output. The big relationship between the population growth and the Industrial Revolution is that more jobs and opportunities were created. The workforce became enormous. This had led to a more suitable lifestyle and then more children. It was a basic domino effect. This time had many new inventions to help with the workload, such as the steam engine, telegraph, the cotton gin, railroads, and electricity. Since everything before was made by hand, many things were made faster and more efficient. This also led to lower prices and more accessible resources. Rapid urbanization led to dense, cramped housing and living conditions created by vast new city-dwelling populations and a new sort of social order. Population had a huge impact on lawmaking and the political viewpoint because of the working conditions and that the factories had for the newcomers, public health, and child labor. Everything took time, hardship, and sacrifice, but over the years, people were able to make it through life with a bigger smile on their face. Say the color, not the